I was in Cebu, and we were at a rally. The rally started at 3 o'clock, and because we wanted it to end while it was still light, we finished at 5:30. And by the time we returned to our host's home, it must have been around 6 o'clock. But we had a friend with us who is a journalist, and she reported back to Manila, and she got the news that Mr. Enrile and General Ramos had indeed gone to Aguinaldo, and we were just, so amazing. None of us knew if he had been arrested or if he had gone there voluntarily. It wasn't until maybe an hour afterwards when we were finally able to get more news about him that I was talking to Minister Enrile at around, imagine this, around 9 o'clock. And I remember telling him that, Johnny, I'm sorry, the only thing I can do for you now is to offer you my prayers. And he said, well, Cory, that's the most important thing, or that's the only thing that counts now. And I said, oh my goodness, is he saying goodbye? Or
were you hiding out at that point, or were there people on your staff or friends and advisors of yours who said, better lie low, this could get very nasty?
Well, that night, I think the men were rather tense, and they were saying, look, maybe we better wait a while. And I was just so sure that the sooner we could get back here, the better it would be.
What did you think was going to happen? I mean, did you believe that it might actually reach the point of civil war? I mean, here you had two of the most powerful military men in the country going up against the rest of the most powerful military men in the country.
But what was most amazing was the reports that I got, and even when I was in Cebu, that the people had just gone to these two camps to defend the military. This was the most amazing part, that for the first time, the civilians were out there defending the military. And so I asked how things were, and the women were telling, we are just ready to, be a human barricade. And they were, in fact, some of them were telling me, we offered cigarettes to the soldiers who were in tanks, and we gave them flowers. And I said, so how did they react to this? Oh, they were very nice, and we shared whatever food we had. And then later on, they turned back. So the things that were happening there were just so unbelievable. But I said, maybe this is what we have long been praying for. And I think it was Monday when I visited the Cardinal.
Cardinal Sin?
Yes. And I told him, well, Your Eminence, you've long been telling me that not to worry and that the miracle is forthcoming, so is this it? And he said, yes, I think so, Cory, because the people are just out there, and we just have to continue to pray that the other side will not resort to violent measures.
Let's jump ahead to Tuesday. Certainly has to rank as one of the more remarkable days in your life. Where were you when you heard that President Marcos had left?
Well, I was at my sister's home, and Ambassador Bosworth had told me that the Marcoses were preparing to leave, in the afternoon, and that he would let me know once they had gotten to Clark Air Base. And he did let me know that, and later on, apparently there was a request from Mr. Marcos to stay longer in the Philippines from Clark. That he wanted to go to Paway, Ilocos Norte. That is his home province. And I asked first, is it because that he believes that his end will come soon, that he would like to die in his own home? And I was assured that it wasn't so. So I said, well, when Mr. Marcos has taken his rest, when he has gotten his sleep, then I have to strongly urge him to continue with his trip, because it is to the greater interest of the Filipino people that he leave the Philippines right away, so that tensions will ease and that we will be able to get back to normalcy at the earliest possible time.
If he dies, and he appears to be a very sick man, if he dies soon, while all the memories are still fresh, and his family said he wants to be buried in his homeland, what would you say?
You know, if we had not gone through such critical days, maybe I could tell you right out now, Ted, sure, they can come back and they can bury him, but we cannot afford that kind of tension now. It's been too soon. Maybe at some future date they can come back, but right now it's out of the question. I cannot endanger more lives.
You're a curious mixture, if you'll permit my saying so, of charity and toughness.
I guess I would have to be that, Ted. I feel very Christian about many things, but there are some cases where I just have to hang tough, not for my sake, but where human lives may be in danger. I do not want to be responsible for any more human lives being lost, because that will forever be on my conscience. Long ago, I have lived my life according to what I believe I should do at the moment, and I'm so convinced that if it isn't my hour to go, then there's nothing anybody can do. On the other hand, if it is time for me to go, then no matter where I am, there's nothing I can do to avoid it. Of course, my security people are telling me I do not have to be so daring, and that I should take some precautions. They did want me to wear a bulletproof vest in our rally before elections. But unfortunately, the bulletproof vest they gave me was a man-sized vest, and it made me look so fat. And I said, no way are you going to make me wear this. Besides, it was so hot. And maybe I would have collapsed from the sheer weight of it and from the heat.
Here you are in this extraordinary position now of being allied with some of the men who were your bitterest enemies. What about the men who were responsible for planning your husband's assassination? Now, there was a commission. The commission implicated, what, 26 men?
Yes, 26.
What about them?
Well, of course, General Ver is gone now. As I said, this commission will undertake not only investigating all of these cases, but putting up the necessary processes to deal with these people who have, with these people who have victimized not only Ninoy Aquino, but so many of our Filipinos.
But it is possible that these men will come to trial.
Yes, that is a most distinct possibility, because justice doesn't mean just mercy. I mean, we can temper justice with mercy, but justice has to be there.
There must be, at this early stage of the presidency, still a little bit of a sense of awe when the phone rings, and I don't know who's called you. It's President Reagan, it's Gorbachev.
No, President Reagan hasn't called me.
He hasn't?
Senator Kennedy has called, and Prime Minister Gandhi has called. Yes, it is a thrill, and I think more than that, it's my children really, especially my youngest daughter, who's just loving all of this. In fact, the first time Senator Kennedy called, she said, oh, you know, Mom, this is it. This is the ultimate. And she just had to say a few lines to him. And so I asked Senator Kennedy to please talk to her. I had met his son, Ted Kennedy Jr. here.
This is the entrance to Malacañan. You walk up a long flight of stairs, and then you turn right, and there is this immense hall where the president receives many dignitaries, and you perhaps have seen this hall in many news clips. By the way, the woman you will be constantly seeing there, who is guiding my way, is my wife, Emmy. Needless to say that both of us felt a sense of awe and a sense of of a lot of tension, I suppose, walking through the palace that was empty, not hearing the voices of anybody except a few guards. And the other thing is that there were a few other people who were allowed in at this point in time. And I can understand, by the way, why the palace authorities, or rather why the government is not allowing everybody into the palace, because if they did without really securing it, I'm sure that there are so many things that you could steal. Now, this is a little room outside the, off the, that main hall, sort of like a small dining room, and then through this dining room, onto the very large hall, I think they call this Mahalika Hall, where the president would always be giving his, his conferences, his press conferences, and also meeting with people. And it was just too difficult for my wife to resist sitting there up on a stage where the dignitaries usually sat. I think the reason for this is that it was really, I guess, a symbol that there is the power that was there before is no longer there when a little person can sit on the seat of someone who was so powerful before. We then went back into the main hall and then turned right into a reception hall, I think it is. And I stand to be corrected by those of you who have been to Malacañan and know it better than I do. We had no guide, we just wandered through. These were photographs of Mrs. Marcos and dignitaries from around the world. That is Deng Xiaoping, the Chinese premier, and this was Nancy Reagan and President Reagan, Gorbachev, and this was the First Lady dancing with President Reagan, Mr. and Mrs. Bush. There were actually many, many photographs. Castro, Premier Castro, but we didn't have time. You must also remember that we had to move. The soldiers kept telling us, move on. And actually, I lost the group after a while and stayed behind and tried to take as much as I could. Then we went from this deeper into the private area, and this was I would think it was a family place, and this was a room where the pictures of the first family were exhibited, and this woman was the woman who painted that picture of Imelda, and she was very happy to see that it had not been destroyed. This room is looking over the Pasig River. It's a small room, and they have paintings of all the children, and this is a painting of Amy. And then this picture I think we all recognize as, because we've seen it on calendars, and it is a pretty well-known picture of the president, the ex-president. And this is Bongbong Marcos. And finally, Irene. One last sweep of the room. And then we move off into a study. You can see it was darker here because most of the lights are chandeliers or these wall lights, and so it becomes a little bit more difficult to get strong lighting. This is a room that everybody is familiar with because this is where the president has met countless people, and this is just off the large hall that we saw a little while back. And once again, one of the visitors who was there decided to appropriate himself the chair for a short while. And From that room, we moved into a rather large, there are so many rooms, I don't know what you would call it, but here's a small sitting room, I suppose. I actually let all the tape roll. We have not edited this tape, so if it's shaky, it's because I'm walking, and also because I'm quite tense as I go through this hall. This is the anteroom to the library. And there was a very, very larger-than-life photograph of a painting that I think is somewhere abroad, perhaps in the States, of the former First Lady. It was very, very strange walking through the palace, everything so quiet. It was as if, and you could tell that things had been abandoned very quickly. Papers were here and there. This is the library. Very, very high bookshelves that go right up to the ceiling. And I believe that the president, the ex-president, used to spend a lot of time here in his study working. There were still things on his desk. Everywhere in the palace, at least upstairs, we had these beautiful chandeliers. There were some rooms that I think I missed. I did not get that operating room that everybody is talking about. We opened the door of the study and into the room, the bedroom of the president. It's a very large room. It looks like it's 3 rooms that were kind of made into one. It has a number of working tables there, and you will see his bed and the hospital bed that was there. I saw a photograph today in the newspaper, and that hospital bed was not in that position. It wasn't at the foot of the bed, but at the side. But today, that was the position of the bed. I continued to walk. There were 3 large, or rather 2 very large TV screens, or TV sets, and a smaller one. I guess when you're president, you have to watch all the channels, see what's going on. It's a long table. Could have been used for eating or for working. And there was, I don't know exactly, perhaps doctors would be able to recognize what these machines are. There was nothing to identify what the machines were all about. And right behind the machines, as you can see, cotton, bandages, gauze, various kinds of medicines. We were too much in a hurry. We could not, I don't know if this looks like IV, and bandages. We were too much in a hurry to be able to stop and see it all. Oxygen tanks and half-used bottles. And now you can see how long that room is. The president's room, a little room in between, and the room of the First Lady comprised the whole one side of the palace. And as you can see, the draperies that were hanging. It seems that I was told that when they first arrived, the pajama top of the president was still there on the bed, and they were the mattresses that are piled in a corner were spread around the floor. Seems that the family of the president would sleep there oftentimes, and I've read somewhere that in the last hours they did congregate in this room. Next to his bed, the president had a control panel, which I believe is a communications panel with the various rooms in the palace. Telephones, and Then we went into the anteroom of the bathroom. I say anteroom because there were basically two rooms. This is where the sink is, and there were lots and lots of medicines right there. And I told my wife, don't touch, because we were asked not to touch. There were more medicines down below. Telephones. You could tell that the departure was very, very hasty. On the floor was a plastic bag full of pans. This is the president's weights that he used to lift. There's a shower. And then you walk up 3 steps or so and into the bathroom where there is a large tub. There's a mural, a scene from the outside that's a mirror on this side. The ceilings are mirrors right across the ceilings. There's a small room inside, which when I went in, I found there was some sort of a motor. In order to get an idea of how deep that tub was, I asked Amy and a friend to step inside. It took some doing to get out. Now, my wife is not a tall woman, by the way. She's only about 4'11". And there were, again, lots of medicines. In a way, I would think that shortly these things will all be cleaned up, but this will give the people an idea of what it was like before it got all cleaned up. We're back into the bathroom, the first part of the bathroom of the president. His slippers are there. And then upon a second panning, I saw his glasses, his or someone's glasses that were just left, I suppose in a rush to leave. That is not my wife. That's the other guy who's touching. And then we noticed that this chair was a portable toilet. I suppose if someone is not feeling too well and cannot make it to the bathroom, then the bathroom goes to him. As you can see, the soldiers are keeping an eye out. As you leave the bathroom, look straight ahead, there's a working table. You look to your right and you see that part of the bedroom. A lot of newspapers, magazines. And you look to the left and you see again working tables and I think some exercise, some things that, and as we were leaving, somebody noticed talked about electric car or a car that actually runs. It's I think it's for the grandson or for one of the children. And there are refrigerators there. And now we are going to leave the room of the president, and there is a small anteroom, and this is the room of the First Lady. I apologize because there is very little light, and I did not have any lamp. We were shooting with just the available light. This is the First Lady's bed. It is about 10 to 12 feet across. It's a very wide bed. And this is inside her bathroom. There is also 2 rooms in the bathroom. The first room, that sink is either gold-plated or gold, but it's a gold color. And from there we go into the bathroom. There are baskets of, I think, perfumes, and this is a basket of soap, different bars of soap from various parts of the world. And 1, 2, 3, 4 more baskets of different bars of soap. This is on the edge of the bathtub. Again, a very deep tub. All around the edges of the tub were perfumes, soaps. There was also a seascape that covered the whole wall. The ceiling was completely mirrored also. So I'm shooting at the ceiling now and you're seeing the reflection downward. Telephones. Shower. And now as we step down again from the bath, there are dresses there, but we were not able to go into the room where all the dresses that everybody's been hearing about were. This is back to the sink. Inside these closing panels were perfumes. From the First Lady's room, we go out into the dining room. I believe this is one of the many, at least 3 dining rooms. And here you can see that the food warmers were still there. And we will come back to this later. We now pass through the kitchen into a study of sorts and into the chapel. This is the private chapel, I believe. It's a very, very small chapel. There are beautiful statues, decorated with very expensive, I'm not a jeweler, so I don't know how expensive those stones would be. The altar where Mass was said, Santo Niño, Infant Jesus of Prague. Now we leave the chapel and go back out to through the study to the kitchen once again. What made me and my wife feel very, very funny is to see the food still there. In fact, when Emmy asked me what struck you the most, I said it was the food still lying on the table. It was as if we were, they had left maybe 5 minutes before. And there was this silence throughout the whole place. You could hear our footsteps. We missed the place where they cook the food. I believe it's right behind where the pots and pans are. This is the informal dining room, I suppose. Right outside was a large statue of Christ. That is where we came from before. And so now we're going to go out the other door and continue our journey through the palace. As you all go out here, there is this great square where there are rooms all around this great courtyard. Down below you see boxes and boxes of I don't know what that had crates of things that perhaps were being ready to be shipped out. Just outside the kitchen, the first room, this is the entrance to the anteroom, I suppose, to the bedroom, I think, of a child, perhaps one of the little ones. Amy, perhaps, I'm not sure. So this is the room before you get to the room of the child. You see little dolls, puppies, little toy puppies. No, what happened is I went out the wrong door and I found myself back in the study. So I said, Garen, you better get back. Now we're going into the room of the child. Before we get to the room, there were closets or aparadors. These do not belong to the First Lady. I believe that they were too short in length. And as we walk through this little corridor with all the aparadors, we now go into, finally, the room of a child. And this is facing the front of, looking out onto the street in front of Malacañan. This is, I think, the bed of the yaya, whoever slept with the child. And the big teddy bear that was there on the bed. And this is the room perhaps that I will remember the most, because after we take a look around, I saw, no, I'm sorry, it's not that room, it's another room. Now we leave the child's room and go into another bedroom, and there is a signboard that says Marcos now more than ever. And here is another child's room with the little toy truck, the dolls. And this is the room that I will always remember. The star margarine that is still on the table, the mineral water, and the spoon and a fork. Emmy told me that it was fish that they were eating. The teddy bear. You knew that behind all of this was a lot of very human happenings in the palace. Children running around, and from the child's room we went out into another room that is strictly a library. No tables were there, but a lot of very, very old books. Very old books. The books were, the covers were very, very beaten, old, perhaps older than I am. And from that room we thought perhaps we might find something in another small room, but there wasn't anything there, so we left and went into another room, which is like a dining room, which is, I suppose, when they have a number of guests, a limited number of guests. There's a lot of china, very expensive tableware, and this dining room opens out onto another chapel, a larger chapel. There are photographs on the table, and a larger-than-life size statue of the Blessed Mother in the corner. This statue is much larger than I am, and I am 6 feet 2 inches tall. There are sofas in the chapel, and there is the altar. Saint Michael. Lady of Fatima. You see now the dining room. We're looking back into the dining room. And just off the dining room was this small enclave, a bust of the former First Lady. And behind that, an empty room. I don't know if, I think that could have been filled with water. And then we turned right into another bedroom. Again, here the lights were not very good. A very large television screen. No, I'm sorry, that was an anteroom. Here is the bedroom with another large TV. This struck me as being perhaps the room of a man more than that of a woman. Still the same bedroom. There was a small room that went off from the bedroom. Then we went out again onto into the hallway facing the courtyard, and then we were getting close to where we started. There was a small room that came from the reception halls, painting. And then this small room led to the elevator, a private elevator. Now, I went back to the bedroom because my wife forgot her bag, and she forgot it in the bedroom. So while we were there, I took a little bit more footage because it seemed to me that the lights were not on the first time around, so. And then back into the kitchen. I'm sorry, into the small dining room. And I went back into the chapel because those were such beautiful images, statuettes, that I wanted to shoot again. We thought that this film perhaps would be edited, but it wasn't. The altar. That is the courtyard. There's a fountain in the middle of the courtyard. There are things strewn about, crates, boxes. And now we are on our way back to where we started the tour. We take a look, one last look at the Great Hall before turning and going down the long stairway, red velvet, to the stained glass window doors at the bottom of the stairs that lead out into the back of Malacañan. Right now the people are allowed to be in Malacañan Park, which is in front of Malacañan, but are not yet allowed to go behind Malacañan. As you will see, this is behind. There are very, very few people because none is allowed at this point in time. I thought that we should perhaps pan around the courtyard behind Well, this is looking at Malacañan, looking at the palace. This is at the right-hand side. And then we went nearer to the side of the river into another garden, and I was told that this is a mosque. Someone told me that this was built when Colonel Gaddafi came, so he would have a place to worship. The Pasig River is just beyond the wall. And I would encourage that anyone who would visit Malacañan to be very careful. This is the people's, and to step on the flowers and to destroy things is to destroy heritage, Philippine heritage. And we finish with the flag. And perhaps that's one way to stop the tape.
Already, soldiers formerly loyal to President Marcos and now loyal to the opposition have declared themselves in charge of the country. From their headquarters in 2 military camps in suburban Manila, the rebels made good on their claim by loading up their helicopter gunships and going for a strafing run at Manila's largest military airbase, where they knocked out aircraft still parked on the tarmac. President Marcos and his top general tried to demonstrate their authority on national television.
You're going to control all the time, Mr. President.
Without shooting them. No, hold on. You disperse the crowd without shooting them.
But before Marcos could finish speaking, he was cut off in mid-sentence. Opposition forces had taken over the television station and taken the president off the air. Marcos has not been seen publicly since that aborted broadcast this morning. He remains inside his palace, surrounded by an assortment of still loyal troops, including a unit of Navy Seabees more used to construction work than riot duty. As word of Marcos' demise spread today, his opponents joyfully took to the streets, happily mingling with soldiers who switched their allegiance and who just days ago were a threat to anyone daring to oppose the president.
Well, we are sorry for that little occurrence. I think we have a
Filipinos risked their lives to protect the rebels. It was like a crusade. Thousands of people swarmed around government troops and armored units that were preparing to launch an assault against the rebels. These armored personnel carriers were stopped a mile from rebel positions. The potential for violence was there, but the people intervened to protect the rebels. They formed a human barricade, professing nonviolence as church leaders had urged, and they called on government troops to join the rebels. The government soldiers said they'd follow orders. But they didn't seem eager to fight.
This is something which never happened before. So I think finally we are seeing Filipino people power at its best.
The rebels say that Marcos used military personnel and others to cheat Mrs. Aquino out of victory in the recent presidential election.
I think the president will realize that within the next few days that the entire nation will be clamoring for his departure.
On Philippine television, President Marcos said he would not resign and repeated it on American TV.
I am president. I was proclaimed by the only constitutional body that can canvass and proclaim the winner in the presidential election. So why should I step down?
So far, threats haven't swayed the rebels. In a telephone conversation with Marcos, they rejected his offer of amnesty if they surrendered. Fighting continued this morning outside a television station controlled by pro-Marcos forces. Snipers in a transmission tower shot at rebel troops that were trying to take over the station. Despite sporadic clashes, there has not been any widespread fighting. The The rebels continue to claim that government troops are defecting to their side, including elite ranger units, helicopter gunship squadron, most of the Air Force, and most Navy ships. The rebel leaders said that 85% of the military backed them.
A U.S. State Department spokesman said the Reagan administration is looking into the possibility of freezing Philippine assets.
On the streets outside rebel headquarters, thousands of Filipinos defied a nighttime curfew imposed by President Marcos. They made their homes out in the open to provide an extraordinary human barricade around the rebel positions. Pro-Marcos forces did not attempt any attacks. Pro-government troops have not been seen in any great numbers out in force, only at checkpoints near the presidential palace, where they're trying to keep demonstrators away. Security around the palace remains tight. President Marcos has remained in his palace since the mutiny began Saturday. While President Marcos made preparations to be sworn in as president for another 6 years, Corazon Aquino was sworn in by an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court.
Proclaiming Mrs. Corazon C. Aquino and former Senator Salvador H. Laurel as President-elect and Vice President-elect of the Republic of the Philippines.
Mrs. Aquino quickly named her vice presidential running mate, Salvador Laurel, Prime Minister. She named rebel leaders Juan Ponce Enrile, Defense Minister, and General Ramos, Chief of Staff. It was Enrile and Ramos who began the rebellion that is slowly toppling the Marcos government.
In history, Monaco Moncapic, as he does 2 mornings a week, was getting in a round of golf with a friend. Moncapic and his partner are hardly typical Filipinos, but they do share a feeling common to others here, that this very tenuous political moment will somehow turn out all right, because outsiders are not involved, and Filipinos have a way of working out their own problems.
Well, I think this is Filipino style and this is Filipino life. Because both of them, maybe they are afraid to kill each other because they are both Filipinos.
Barely a mile's distance from where political and military leaders were struggling over who would run this country, life seemed to be going on as normal. There was no shortage of the folkloric jeepney taxicabs, nor traffic on the streets. But if you look closely enough at even a normal scene, the troubles here were not far in the background. The local Dunkin' Donuts was shut. There weren't enough employees to keep it open. They either didn't come in because they were taking part in events, or because they were afraid of them.
I don't know where are they. Maybe they are there in their house.
Across the street, though, Andrew's restaurant was still open, although the manager said because of the power struggle, there were fewer customers. And yet, Mrs. Preciosa Davis said she didn't mind. In her 65 years, this was the most exciting moment she'd ever lived through.
Very, very historic. This has never happened before. And then we get scared. It's just natural to get scared. Nobody wants to die. And besides, Filipinos fighting Filipinos, there's no point there.
So, while not everyone here was manning the barricades, few were not following the historical drama that is being played out around them.
Scenes outside the presidential palace have been chaotic. Thousands of people, pro and anti-Marcos. Soldiers fired into the air to try to break up the crowds. These demonstrators have been out here all day. Their numbers growing as word of Marcos' departure circulated. The anti-government demonstrators tried to overrun the barricades to attack the palace. Soldiers tried to stop them. All day, the two sides have been throwing rocks and insults at each other. They finally met head-on. It was violent. They kicked and beat at each other. Journalists stood between them for a while, trying to keep the angry apart. Finally, even Aquino backers moved in, saying, "This must stop. Now we are all brothers."
The barricades went down, and in the rebellious mob, physically or spiritually, were bankers and bus drivers.
My heart is jumping in joy.
Housewives and businesswomen.
I think it's the Philippines' most finest hour.
Rarely in recent history has a revolution collected such a diverse group of revolutionaries. One might expect in a country where the average wage is $2 a day that the seeds of rebellion could be planted in the slums of the city. But they took root too in the most fashionable drawing and dining rooms of Manila. Take Gil Kuenjang, general manager of a pharmaceutical firm, born into one of the wealthiest families in the country. For 4 nights, he and his chic friends, including one of the country's top fashion designers, camped out all night on thin straw mats, joining the hundreds of thousands who stood ground unarmed, facing off with Marcos' loyalist soldiers.
I mean, sleeping in the streets is not my idea of fun. There are bigger things at stake here, and we put aside our own personal interests, whatever that may be, and said, well, I think this is one chance for us to work together.
And what drew them together was hatred for their ex-president's corruption and his final perversion of the nation's fledgling democratic institutions. Marcos apparently never understood how universal the hatred was.
The people who faced the tanks who brought Marcos down weren't part of any particular group or class, but part of something that cut across Filipino society.
A movement that detested all the former president represented. Jim Bitterman, NBC News, Manila.
There was anger in their jubilation. When the palace troops withdrew, Marcos and Aquino sides finally clashed. As Aquino backers overpowered their opponents, some demanded that the violence stop. We are all brothers now, they said. Word spread that Marcos and his family had fled, and the crowds grew. They flooded into the splendor of the Marcos Palace, and their feelings were clear. For the Marcos family, this was to have been a day of celebration. Thousands of his faithful had gathered earlier at the palace for Marcos to take the oath of office on national TV. But that event was never seen by the Filipino people. The rebel troops overran the television station and pulled the plug.
Corazon Cojuangco Aquino,
Corazon Cojuangco Aquino,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
She too was sworn in as president.
the long agony is over. We are finally free, and we can be truly proud of the unprecedented way we achieved our freedom.
Cory Aquino, American educated from one of the country's wealthiest families. Though just a housewife, she became a national symbol for change, promising within 100 days to crack down on governmental corruption and begin immediate economic reforms. Honest, a bit naive, inexperienced, but the one person who had a chance of beating Marcos. Salvador Laurel, the new prime minister, once a Marcos crony. Rich, politically smart, he brings experience she needs to deal with the Marcos infrastructure she inherits. Juan Ponce Enrile, the new defense minister, worked for Marcos for 20 years. Will his loyalty and that of the military carry over into the early and what promises to be trying days of the Aquino presidency? General Fidel Ramos, the new chief of staff, a West Point graduate. Can he reform the military and deal with the communist insurgency at the same time? But the first thing Mrs. Aquino will have to do is heal the wounds inflicted by the years of Marcos's regime. In campaign speeches, she said her first order of business would be to restore the nation's self-respect and confidence. But the people will expect more. To do that and bring long-term economic recovery, she must tap the energy of this popular support and sustain the momentum of democratic reform. The people seem ready. Steve Mallory, NBC News, Manila. There was jubilation outside the palace walls. Fireworks were going off. Thousands of people, ecstatic that Marcos had left, swarmed around the gates and walls. Guards tried to push them away. No serious confrontations. But the anti-Marcos, pro-Aquino bankers couldn't be stopped. They swarmed over the walls and gates. They chanted the nickname of their new president. As the people were able to get inside, they began to throw papers out of windows. Doors were pushed open, and they surged inside, chanting Cory. This patriotic man kissed the flag. Once inside, they began to take vengeance against the memory of the man and his family who ruled their country for 2 decades. They began to trash the place. There was some anger in their jubilation. The palace is still occupied by anti-Marcos demonstrators. Authorities are trying to get troops there now to restore order. Tom?
The revolution was over, and the people were trying to hang on to what they had. 13 crates full of newly printed Philippine money worth $3 million was seized from the driver for Ferdinand Marcos' brother-in-law. Private planes were stopped at the airport. No one would explain what had been in the armored cars standing open next to this one. But the revolutionaries weren't completely successful. At a Justice Ministry office, files and documents were going up in smoke, and the man who was burning them wasn't happy to be photographed.
Who are you?
The police. In Manila Bay, the presidential yacht sailed off. It wasn't sure who was in command. There seemed good reason for the new president to move quickly to install her people. She introduced those who would run her government and set out their top priority.
Our first concern will be to help improve the lot of the poor, the unemployed, and the underemployed.
The American ambassador, who long championed Mrs. Aquino's cause with those less supportive in Washington, brought his government's respects to the new president. Throughout the day here, the new leaders received enormous support from around the world, praising the way they seized power. Now they can begin demonstrating how they'll use it. Jim Bitterman, NBC News, Manila.
The Philippines without Marcos, day 1. The people rejoiced. The newly elected president, Corazon Aquino, and vice president, Salvador Laurel, made an impromptu public appearance and then got down to business, setting the tone for the nation's future.
It is now time to heal the wounds, to forget the past, so that we can speed up the reconciliation and the recovery of the nation.
The economic stagnation, high unemployment, widespread poverty are the prime target areas. Mrs. Aquino announced her cabinet, men and women with the experience to deal with these problems, but who also have the respect of the people.
We have to present a government now that will enjoy the confidence of the people, because that is exactly what Mr. Marcos' government didn't have, the confidence of the people, and that's why it collapsed.
Faith in the new leadership began showing as the nation returned to normal. People were out in the streets. Stores had reopened. The relatively peaceful 4-day revolution was over. People didn't seem to want to look or talk of vengeance against the old regime. Still, the government wasn't taking any chances. An ardent Marcos supporter and 8 of his bodyguards were arrested outside the Defense Ministry today after police found automatic weapons in their cars. They said they were paying a courtesy call on the new defense minister, Juan Ponce Enrile. Attempts were being made to spirit hidden wealth out of the country. Soldiers intercepted $3 million worth of new Philippine peso notes in crates being transported to Marcos' brother-in-law abroad. Some private aircraft were grounded to keep passengers and cargo in the country. This armored truck was found empty close to one plane. Its contents unknown. And Marcos' presidential yacht steamed out of Manila Harbor today. The Archbishop of Manila offered a prayer for the former president.
So that he may find the peace of mind and serenity of soul that he, like the rest of us, has been seeking.
The friendly crowds gathered at Marcos' former home, the presidential palace. There's cause to be jubilant. For the first time in a decade, the church, business, the people are united behind the government. Steve Mallory, NBC News, Manila.
Is proclamation number 1, proclaiming the lifting of the suspension of the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus throughout the Philippines. Whereas the then President Ferdinand E. Marcos issuing proclamation number 2045, dated 17 January 1981, and proclamation number 2045A, dated 23 July 1983, suspended the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus in the 2 autonomous regions of Mindanao and in all other places with respect to persons detained for all cases involving the crimes of insurrection, rebellion, subversion, conspiracy or proposal to commit such crimes, sedition, conspiracy to commit sedition, inciting to sedition, and for all other crimes or offenses committed by them in furtherance or on the occasion thereof, or incident thereto, or in connection therewith, such as but not limited to offenses involving economic sabotage, illegal assemblies, illegal associations, tumults and other disturbances of public orders, unlawful use of means of publication, and unlawful utterances, and alarms and scandals, or with respect to any person whose arrest or detention was, in the judgment of the President, required by public safety as a means to repel or quell the rebellion in the country, whereas the proclamations and decrees mentioned and all the related decrees, instructions, orders, and rules were not warranted by the requirements of public safety, since the existing rebellion could have been contained by government sincerity at reforms, by peaceful negotiations and reconciliation, and by steadfast devotion to the rule of law. Whereas instead of serving its purpose of suppressing the rebellion and other threats to national security, the suspension of the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus drove many to the hills and fanned the conspiracy to overthrow the government by violence and force. Whereas the Filipino people have established a new government bound to the ideals of genuine liberty and freedom for all. Whereas the Filipino people have established a new government bound to the ideals of genuine liberty and freedom for all, now therefore, I, Corazon C. Aquino, President of the Philippines, by virtue of the powers vested in me by the Constitution and the Filipino people, do hereby revoke proclamations number 2045 and 2045-A, and do hereby lift the suspension of the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus, so that this guardian of liberty and freedom may be available to all. In witness...
In the same victory celebration at Luneta, Jaime Cardinal Sin read a letter from Pope John Paul II to President Quirino. In his letter, the Pope told Mrs. Aquino, and we quote, "I wish to extend my cordial good wishes and I renew the expression of my constant concerns for the well-being of the entire Filipino people. I offer fervent prayers to our Heavenly Father that He will grant you and your collaborators and all your fellow citizens the wisdom and courage to go forward along the path of justice and national harmony." End of quote. The post-President Ferdinand E. Marcos is staying in seclusion at Hickam Air Base in Hawaii until he decides where he wants to live.
based on the Constitution.
Mr. Minister.
Because we have been...
The Air Force is ready to mount an air attack. We request the civilians to leave the vicinity of Camp Cromwell immediately, Mr. President. That's why I come here in your orders, so we can immediately strike them. We have to mobilize the helicopters that they got. We have 2 fighter planes flying now to strike at any time. So your order, sir.
My order is
that all
not
civilians
to
leave the
attack.
area.
No, you hold on. You're not to attack.
Sir, we are left with no option but to...
Oh, yes.
do so.
But
our negotiations and our prior dialogues have not succeeded, Mr. President. General Ramos. We could have...
Yes, and I understand that General Ramos is issuing orders like a chief of staff.
Yes,
All I can say is we may have to reach the point where we will employ heavy weapons, but you utilize small weapons and hand or shoulder weapons in the meantime.
If it should come to pass that we will lose our lives in this particular moment, we will gladly do it in the service of our people and our nation. For that is the oath that we have taken when we entered the public service.
Ako po ay nakikius dahil sa nangyaring umayo na tayo rito.
I think the President will realize that within the next few days that the entire nation will be clamoring for his departure.
I am president. I was proclaimed by the only constitutional body that can canvass and proclaim the winner in the presidential election. So why should I step down?
Proclaiming Mrs. Corazon C. Aquino and former Senator Salvador H. Laurel as President-elect and Vice President-elect of the Republic of the Philippines.
came here and we couldn't find our names. And there's about 1,000 people who are the same, you know.
I really felt most confident that I would win.
We expect a majority of several millions.
It's a very, very suspicious count.
We're concerned about the violence there and the possibility of fraud, although it could have been that all of that was occurring on both sides.
And if Goliath refuses to yield, we shall keep dipping into our arsenal of nonviolence.
The mandate of the people does not belong to the present regime.
I think this regime is about to crumble. With respect to the military, we are in control of probably 98 to 99%.
Kaya ako po ay nananawagan sa bawat isa na sana'y maging mahinahon.
I am president, so why should I step down?
I, Corazon Cojuangco Aquino, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully.
The long agony is over. We are finally free.
A solution to this crisis can only be achieved through a peaceful transition to a new government.
And I said, Mr. President, you should cut and cut cleanly.
It is a glorious feeling that we have finally regained our democracy, and the most beautiful part is that we did it through peaceful and nonviolent means.
The President is pleased with the peaceful transition to a new government of the Philippines.
I said, Mr. President, are you still there? And finally he came on and he says, yes, I'm here, Senator. He says, I'm so very, very disappointed.
President Marcos is welcome to come to the United States, and as he continues on his life, we wish him to have a life of dignity and honor.
It's now time to heal the wounds, to forget the past, so that we can speed up the reconciliation and the recovery of the nation.
So that he may find the peace of mind and serenity of soul that he, like the rest of us, has been seeking.
My main concern now is the unity of our people. Let us pray. These are very, very difficult times. We have reestablished this democracy, I hope, permanently, and that is the most important thing to me.
Well, we have to come to grips immediately with the urgencies that resulted from the sudden departure of Mr. Marcos and the assumption of office of President Aquino.
This is something which never happened before. So I think finally we are seeing Filipino people power at its best.
My heart is
I think it's the Philippines' silent hour. Very, very historic. This has never happened before. And then we get scared. Just natural to get scared. Nobody wants to die. Besides, Filipinos fighting Filipinos. That's the point.
Well, I think this is Filipino style and this is Filipino life. Because both of them maybe they're afraid to kill each other because they're both Filipinos.
I said that it was time for us to forget the past, and it was most urgent that we work closely with one another so that we can speed up the reconciliation and the recovery of the nation. Yes, it had to be a personal decision because, as I said in my earlier statement, what mattered most to me was to give the people who were indeed endorsing me the best option to finally remove the Marcos regime.
Mabuhay si Cory at si Doy! Mabuhay!
Marcos in happier times. The center of attention, and usually of the cameras, is First Lady Imelda Marcos, who never missed an opportunity to sing to her admiring guests. Much of the merriment on film centers around birthday celebrations for the President and First Lady. On Imelda's birthday in 1985, Ferdinand Marcos sang a love song to his wife. And then she was serenaded by the crowd. This is a birthday buffet for Marcos himself, with a presidential-sized cake. Guests at this palace dinner party in 1983 included American stars Van Cliburn and George Hamilton, good friends and frequent visitors to the Malacañan Palace. The presidential couple hosted fashion shows, dressed the private passion of the First Lady. And in 1983, when the palace was unexpectedly flooded, workers constructed wooden planks to help ferry the First Lady across so as not to spoil her gown. In all, more than 1,000 home videotapes, audio cassettes, and reel-to-reel films were stored in the palace. The Aquino government still undecided as to whether it will add them to the intended museum exhibit here to chronicle an era that has come and gone. Edie Magnus, ABC News, Manila.
Sa kapwa-kilaan papayag mawala ka muli. Di na ko papayag na muling mabawi. Ating kalayaan kay tagal na nating miti. Di na papayagang mabawi muli. Magkakapit-pisig libo-libong tao. Kay sarap pala maging Pilipino. Sama-sama iisa ang atikain. Kailanman di na paalisin. Pilipino sa mundo, mapayapa ang pagbabago. Katotohanan, kalayaan, katarungan ay kayang mapatig na walang lahat. Basta't magkakita tayong basta nang nagaganap sa aming bayan, magkasama ng mahirap at mayaman.